Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to the CPHR webinar, Looking to the Future, What to Expect in the Pharmaceutical Industry in 2023. My name is James, Senior Producer in Pharma, and welcome. Today, we have an exciting lineup for you, but before we begin, we just have a few announcements. Firstly, we suggest using Google Chrome as Chrome offers the best viewing experience. This webinar is designed to be interactive. The docker widget at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media. We'll be taking questions from the audience, so please be sure to type your questions into the question box over your control panel and place your name at the presenter at the beginning in which you would like to direct the question to. Lastly, if you're experiencing any technical problems, please click the help widget found at the bottom of the screen or type issue into the Q&A area and we'll be able to offer one-on-one assistance. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker today, which is Tom Woods, Consultant of Email Thought Leadership at IQVIA. Tom supports IQVIA's thought leadership team on key healthcare topics, working alongside industry experts. Tom has over 5 years of pharmaceutical experience in predominantly commercially focused areas with experience also in business insight, supply chain, pharma sales, and consulting. And he was also part of the BIA Analyst Team of the Year in 2020. So I'll hand over to Tom to begin the presentation. Tom, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Tom Woods. I work in IQVIA's Europe, Middle East and Africa Thought Leadership team. And today I'm going to spend some time, say 20 minutes or so, talking you through what we expect to see in the pharmaceutical industry into 2023. So with that, there are four elements of the agenda I'd like to cover today. The first of which being the global macro trends. And of course, there's going to be some COVID impact analysis that we've got in there. The second, we're going to look at some pressure on the margins that pharmaceutical and life sciences companies are facing today. And we expect this to continue up to 2023 as well. But there's also some good news. There's some innovation and pipeline. There's a lot of new therapies coming through. And we're going to take a bit of time to have a look at what those look like. And then lastly, I want to focus on the digital transformation of healthcare through 2023 and beyond, which hopefully will be of interest to many of us on the call. So the first slide comes from our IQVIA's Global Medicine Spending Trends Outlook to 2026. And if we look in at 2023, particularly, which I've highlighted, we can see that roughly $1.5 trillion of business, this is at ex-manufacturer prices, is in the dark blue there. And that excludes COVID vaccines and therapeutics. But we've also got this light blue section as well, which is around 40 or 42, which is the incremental spend on COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics that we expect to continue to hover around 40 up to 2026. So this is, again, a global view of the pharmaceutical market as we see it. And we're seeing this growth in spending terms at ex-manufacturer prices to $1.6 trillion US in 2023. Now, even though the pharmaceutical market is increasing in value terms, there are inevitably post-pandemic headwinds ahead. And what we've seen, if we look at the left-hand side of the economic stability, economic and healthcare system instability, in fact, there is uneven recovery from COVID across the world today. And the response rate in terms of vaccines has been missed in lots of cases. And we're finding that healthcare systems are facing increasing pressures and constraints, dealing with patient backlogs, and increasing the workforce is under pressure. And a lot of physicians are leaving the profession and pursuing other activities and other professions in light of the pressure that COVID has put them under. And just to top it all off, we've got the macro risks in terms of the inflation that lots of countries are facing across the world. We've got the energy crisis, we've got geopolitical instability. And so we expect a lot of this to continue into 2023 from that perspective, and that will shape how the pharmaceutical industry acts alongside it. But what we have seen in terms of the volume, and this is the volume across Europe in prescriptions in billions of standard units, we've seen that the volumes were impacted hugely in 2020. There was a spike just before, in say February, March time, which exceeded 37 billion units, and then that dropped later in 2020. And now we're seeing, since the end of 2020 into 2022, there's somewhat of a recovery in terms of volume, and this is driven by a lot of the generic medicines. But what we'll see in 2023 is, I think, a slight downward trend from what we've seen over the last couple of years, and it will probably stabilize around the 35 billion units into 2023. And the last aspect of this slide I wanted to touch on was launches. Now, we know that launches did not stop during the pandemic, and but what did happen is that post-COVID launches were 19%, the average monthly sales was 19% lower in post-COVID launches versus pre-COVID launches. And this is in millions of US dollars across the top 8 countries that we analyzed in this study. So the launch environment is becoming more and more challenging. And it's about trying to bridge that gap into 2023 and there are lots of ways that pharma companies and life sciences companies can do that. But this is what we're seeing in terms of our analysis since launch. Now, just building on that margin point that I made earlier, we have here some top line figures from the aggregate top 15 large pharma between 2016 and 2021. And the cost of goods sold, so the actual price or the cost of bringing your medicines to market and selling medicines, has gone up 53% over that time. The R&D spend has gone up 48% in that time. But the sales has not offset that, because even though they've only increased by 40%, which is behind on both fronts. Now, many of you might ask, why is that? Now, one of the reasons is there are new therapies being brought to market, such as RNA, gene and cell therapies, which I'll touch on a bit more later. But one of the key reasons is the R&D costs increasing, because there are more complex requirements from a trial perspective. So there are more specific inclusion and exclusion criteria to define the patient groups you're looking for. And this makes it increasingly hard to recruit. And there are also more complex primary and secondary endpoints. So this is all feeding into the R&D perspective, and then bringing that medicine to market in terms of the manufacturing costs. We know that globally prices are increasing. We're seeing inflation at a very high level. This is again having that impact on your cost of goods sold. So overall, margins are being squeezed, and unfortunately, this isn't going to change too much in 2023. Now, as part of the webinar, I did say that I would touch on the biologics, and on the left-hand side, we can see a chart which looks at the potential savings that the healthcare systems could make globally from patent cliffs and switching to biosimilars from branded biologics. So particularly if we look at the 2021 to 2025 section, non-biologics are 57%, biologics 43%. So that dynamic has changed, but the overall amount of 233 billion is obviously very significant and could obviously impact lots of healthcare systems across the world. But by 2030, we recognize that there are going to be over $500 billion worth of savings to be had. So lots happening in the biologics and biosimilars world. And we also know that Humira in the US is coming off patent in 2023. So another one to keep a close eye on into next year. But if we take a look at the EU and the EU healthcare focus in 2023, we know that from their Pharmaceutical Strategy for Europe document, which they published fairly recently, that there are 4 key elements and key pillars that they are focusing on into 2023. The first of which being access, making sure that patients have access to the treatments that they need and that the unmet medical need is being met. And then we've got the making sure that once they get access to those treatments, that they actually work. So the efficaciousness and the efficacy of those medicines needs to be put under the microscope. And of course, as I've alluded to throughout this so far, is that COVID has been an underlying elephant in the room, if you like. And we need to make sure that should a similar pandemic happen again, that we are more prepared as healthcare systems and healthcare ecosystems can respond in better ways. And the last point is around sustainability. So every company that I've talked with recently has said, what is your ESG or environmental sustainability and governance goals, and how are you looking to reduce your carbon emissions, etc. And this is something that's on the healthcare agenda, it's on company agendas. And from a sustainability perspective, we've actually run some studies at IQVIA, and we found that actually the environment, for a positive environmental impact on 80% of the world's medicines, 500 companies need to drive change. And those 500 companies, or out of those 500 companies, 50% of them have headquarters in either the US or Europe, and another 40% are based either in India or China. So these are the key areas that we're thinking are going to be of focus from a sustainability standpoint, and we look forward to seeing how that pans out in 2023. Now, if we take a global perspective on innovation and biopharma, and I wanted to draw attention first on the left-hand side to Europe. Now, this is these are pie charts that show the share of pipeline candidates by company segment and HQ location. So looking at Europe, we know that there are nearly 2,000 pipeline candidates, and actually 47% of these candidates are held by what we're terming EBP, or emerging biopharma companies. Now, these are companies that have maybe one or two, possibly three assets in development. And actually, this is the source of the majority of innovation in the pharmaceutical and life science industry today. And we expect this to continue very much into 2023 and beyond. So what's interesting is obviously Europe has got a high percentage of EBP, also a large percentage of large pharma in terms of the pipeline candidates. But I did want to draw attention to the fact that the US and China have even higher, more than 50%, so 62 and 83%, respectively, of pipeline candidates held by emerging biopharma companies. So lots going on with the small and medium-sized pharma companies, and we expect those to be either partnering or getting bought out with M&A in 2023, or in fact going alone and commercializing products themselves. Now, for those products that they're launching, what we define at IQVIA as innovation is new active substances. Now, new active substances are things that haven't necessarily been launched on the market before. And if we look on the left-hand side, look at the number of global new active substance launches, we can see that actually there have been more launches in 2021 than any other year, going back to at least 2000. So this is a lot due to the COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics. But we also need to consider all other therapies that are being brought to market. So if we look at the right-hand side now, to the US, new active substance launches, we can look at specialty and orphans, and we can see the upward trajectory across both of those types of drug. And I think, interestingly, what we will see more going into 2023 and beyond is this advanced therapy, so cell, gene, and RNA therapies, which have started to come to market, but there's so much untapped potential, whether that's CAR T cells and CRISPR therapeutics. There's a huge amount of potential that we may see realized in the next year or so. Now, I wanted to have a quick look at the 2021 figures purely because we saw a lot of new active substances being launched that year, and some of those will inform or influence what we might see in 2023. So there are 4 different areas that I'd like to focus on. So infectious disease, of course, COVID, neurology, dementia and mental health. Oncology, of course, there's a huge number of indications that are being tested and trialed in clinical trials today. And hematology. So these are the 4 key areas that we've seen EMA approval for across in terms of new active substances in 2021. And we think that these 4 areas are going to be of interest for the foreseeable future, particularly into 2023. But nowadays, it's not enough just to launch a medicine. There's so much more coming from the space of digital health in terms of apps. And we've now seen over 2,500 disease-specific apps being brought to market. And a lot of these, 22% in this case, are focusing on mental health and behavioral disorders. And again, out of COVID, we've seen that mental health has become particularly challenging for a lot of members of the public. So we're seeing that's going to be an increased area of focus. But the problem that tech companies and people that produce these apps finding that, yes, they're bringing really innovative stuff to market, but is it actually getting prescribed in the first place? And then is it getting reimbursed? And if we look at the digital landscape in Germany, these depression and anxiety apps that are really leading in their field are struggling to get reimbursed. So some of them have done better than others, but there's more to come in 2023 in terms of the app landscape moving forward. And on a similar theme to the apps is the digital transformation. So there's headlines in the news almost daily around AI detecting dementia, cancer cures existing in big data, particularly linking to real-world evidence. We've got ideas about robot surgeons, where either the surgery is conducted completely autonomously, or the surgeon will be based, say, in the States, but actually the surgery will be done maybe somewhere in Europe. So lots of potential in terms of tech there. And we're also seeing that virtual wards are becoming more vital to help NHS tackle the substantial pressures that we're facing, particularly where I'm based in London, and also across the world. Lots of other healthcare systems are facing similar challenges. And I don't know if anyone is struggling to get appointments with GPs in terms of primary care, but telehealth and engaging with physicians virtually and via video links is becoming more and more the norm. And I think that's going to continue very much into 2023. But if we pause for a second and think about the impact across healthcare and drug development, for example, we've got AI-powered R&D, machine vision to improve the extraction from high-content assays. There's so much potential for technology to expand its reach in this space. And then for healthcare efficiency, precision medicine, leveraging patient biological data for better outcomes. This is something that's been talked about for a while, and I think there'll be significantly more progress going into the next, at least 2023, if not 2024. And then lastly, there's the point around commercialization. Once these products have been developed by pharma companies or smaller biopharma companies, it's about bringing these products to market to make sure they get used into the patients that need them. So demand planning, price optimization, mapping customer journeys can all be done via improved and enhanced commercial operations, underpinned and supported by digital technologies. Now, I wanted to touch on some of the analysis that we did earlier this year in IQVIA EMEA Thought Leadership. And this benchmarked healthcare systems, particularly in most countries, if not all countries, across Europe, Middle East and Africa. So we looked at 12 different aspects of the healthcare systems and assigned a digital maturity score. And the chart on the right plots that digital maturity score against the GDP per capita. And what we can see is there is some correlation between those two factors, between the X and Y axis. And it's interesting because we've also benchmarked and looked at these countries, whether they're architects, whether they're builders, and actually segmented them in different ways to see whether the healthcare landscape is beneficial and ways that they could potentially improve the healthcare provision in a particular country. So lots more to come in their space, but digital is definitely transforming healthcare, and we're seeing that on a global basis. Now, I want to spend a couple of minutes just rounding off really on three different stakeholders, if you like. So the authorities, the core players, and the disruptors. Now, traditionally, it's always been the large pharma, the wholesalers, the pharmacies, and the patients which have dominated the healthcare space. But now it's becoming a more complex web of stakeholders with governments, with payers, with HTA bodies and regulators, all interacting at different points. And it's these relationships that are going to define what 2023 looks like. And I think particularly the disruptors are the ones to watch. So it's the emerging biopharma, it's the tech companies, the e-commerce platforms and the API manufacturers that are changing the way they do things, they're changing the way how they interact with, who they engage with. And the questions are going to be asked around, do they have the right capabilities to be successful in these engagements? And increasingly, we're finding that these unique and valuable partnerships are being created more and more, whether that's through face-to-face conferences that are coming back, or indeed just reaching out and finding new connections that previously they would not have necessarily considered. So the balance of power between these three different areas of stakeholders is changing, and we are yet to see, we're keeping a close eye on how this interplay evolves over time. So that's it from me for now. I think I'll pass back to James at this stage, and thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Tom, for that very insightful talk. Now, I would like to move on to our next speaker of the day, which is Vincent Gallon, who is the health tech expert, investor, and founder of Tech for Pharma. So, Vincent has over 10 years' experience in digital health and international relations, and he's the founding partner of the first independent digital health and pharma pack accelerator in Europe, and teaches at several French medical and business schools about deep tech entrepreneurship and digital health. I'd like to hand over to Vincent now to begin his talk. Vincent, over to you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for the introduction. Indeed, I'm a medical researcher by training, and then I came into the digital health fields. And so I was asked, what's to expect in the pharma industry towards digital health in the next few years? And this is what I will try to answer. First of all, let me change the slide. First of all, everything said and logos are proprietary of their owner, and it's only my view and point of things of external consultant experts, and it doesn't mean endorsement. Digital health and pharmatech, current state and 2023 perspectives. First, let's have a very brief look at what we talk about digital technologies. And in my opinion, we are having them in four main families, considering the pharma industry. So we have mobile sensors and Internet of Things. We have all related to cloud, big data, artificial intelligence, including machine learning. We have software as a service, chatbots, social media, and omnichannel, as I will talk a bit later. And also blockchain, metaverse, and Web 3.0, which is one of the most trendy topics in digital field nowadays. All those new digital products and services and technologies are mainly developed by startups and tech giants. And this is very important because it means that the pharma industry have to collaborate with those startups and tech giants to develop their expertise and offering. Just to have a few examples of what digital technologies can do along the way, and it's not exhaustive, and I will not cite every of them, but we can virtually find all those technologies all along the value chain of the pharma industry, either in clinical monitoring, clinical trial management, patient recruitment, patient retention, technologies for electronic consent, e-diaries, digital pills. We can find those technologies in clinical outcome assessments, and of course, electronic patient-reported outcomes. Also, what we call digital therapeutics, quality of life index, real-world data, real-world evidence, and remote key opinion leader management, and so on. So those technologies are virtually now paving the way in the whole value chain, and it's impossible to get without them today. And if you want to do something, you will always find something interesting to do. Let me check if I have this right slide. Yeah. So how we can explain this acceleration towards digital health? First, as said Tom before, we can see that healthcare spendings forecasted to double by 2030. And there's a continued pressure on pricing. And at the same time, we have a significant research and development productivity issue with research and development returns well below the cost of capital, which means that medicine alone are not enough nowadays. And we have to change our mindset in today's competitive and connected and changing healthcare environment. Also, what's explained the shift toward digital health is that pharma companies are witnessed some big failure, and they don't want to be the next one to die. We have all the example of Kodak, for example, but also of Nokia, who didn't see the digital transformation coming or didn't embrace it completely, and then completely were disrupted by those disruptions, basically. Also, what we can see is like there's a lot more of unicorns in the field. So unicorns are companies, basically startups that are valued at $1 billion. And in healthcare, there are more unicorns than in other industry, which means there's a lot of money. Investors are pouring a lot of money. And if investors pouring a lot of money, it means that there's a lot of calls for entrepreneurs who wants to develop technologies for the pharma industry. So it's like a virtuous circle helping the industry to go digital. But last but not least, of course, here is the most recent accelerator of digital transformation, which is COVID-19. We all seen during COVID-19 that, we changed the behavior of working people. We have developed telehealth, teleconsultations, and we more and more trust digital technologies, and this was on the main accelerator. This means that we have digital health ecosystems that are structuring and booming all over the world. As said Tom also earlier, countries are getting more and more digital, and almost all European countries today have a digital health strategy and digital health roadmap, as shown by this study from EY and the French Ministry of Health. Also, just to have a bit of context in France, as you remember, France is the second largest pharma market in Europe and the fifth in the world. And we have launched a lot of different initiatives in digital health, either the Health Data Hub, which is a simplified access to health data platform for all professional and research teams, either public or private. We have different investment programs for digital health, and the country is employing more than 30,000 people in digital health with more than 1,000 startups. And we have also legislation and the government trying to help digital health coming up. For example, we have a new agreement between the representative of the pharma industry called the LEM and the CEPS, which is the French Economic Committee for Health Products, which take into account investments in digital solutions for maintaining the drug pricing at the governmental level. And this is completely new and kind of crazy because it's completely directing the price of the drugs depending on investment on digital for pharma companies. So this is one of the great news we have with the government as digital enthusiasts. Also, we have a lot of different incubators and accelerators of digital health startups. Here is a few examples of the main ones in Europe, mostly in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in London, of course, in England. Some of them specialize in certain therapeutic areas, such as the IPEPS, is the Brain and Spine Institute Incubator for Startups. We have a more comprehensive accelerators such as Digital Health London and Digital Fam Lab, which I founded a few years ago also in Pharma Technologies. And if you want to collaborate and find startups to work with, is in those kind of institutions that we'll find them mostly. Just here a view about what's happening in other continents, and of course it's not exhaustive, but it's not only in Europe, but also in Asia. Everything is getting very fast. I could also talk about India, but time is short. But here you can find different other players, for example, in Asia, in Taiwan, in Singapore, in South Korea, in China, and so on. And this was not existing 5, 6, even 4 years ago. And we see more and more of these coming up in the field. Also, what we can witness in 2023 and more is what we call digital therapeutics. Tom talked a bit earlier, so I shortened my part here. But we can see here the different partnerships between pharma and tech companies in digital therapeutics. We can see that virtually all big players here are developing some digital therapeutics with specialized startups in different therapeutic areas. If we have to number them and try to find in therapeutic areas, we find that most of those partnerships are done in oncology and cardiovascular, also diabetes, women's health, and neurology. Mainly lot of them are made in United States. It's a very vibrant area also in China, United Kingdom, and most of them in Asia, Pacific, and North America. Also, what we have a trend in digital health for 2023 is in pharma industrial operations. So just a few words about the global Lighthouse network. Maybe you never heard of it. So it was a network created during the World Economic Forums who are recognizing the companies, pharma companies, incorporating 4 industrial revolution technologies from artificial intelligence to Internet of Things into daily manufacturing and supply chain operations, effectively creating most advanced factories across the globe. And so those companies embracing the pharma tech revolution in manufacturing and supply chain are called Lighthouse. So we have a lot of them along, in Europe and also in Asia and America. Like you can have a full map if you want to find them. And here are some examples of, thanks to those digital technologies, what they could improve. It can be either the speed of technology transfer from R&D, the process failure, CO2 emissions, of course. We can find also increasing productivity in downtime by station. It's really depending on the industry and where it's happening. So you can find a full report easily on the World Economic Forum website. What we have also is we have a trend. This is more specific to pharma marketing, but we have a trend in digital technologies to contact and reach healthcare professionals. Of course, we talked a lot earlier with multi-channel strategy, but now we are talking more and more about omnichannel strategy, which is the integration, orchestration, and tailoring of customer interactions across multiple channels to match healthcare professional and patients' profile-specific needs. And more pharma companies nowadays, I can witness, are going towards omnichannel strategy to reach their customers. We have a lot of different channels available, more and more nowadays. Here is some of them. And the best is to have a comprehensive and orchestrated, as I said, ways of reaching out the HCPs and also the patients. One thing that is very trendy, and I saw this increasing more and more this year, and it will more increase next year, is non-standard marketing activation. For example, with Twitter. So this is an observatory of the best tweets by interaction rate for the top accounts in France. So I'm monitoring what's happening there every semester, and we can see that we have a lot of engagement from the patient and the healthcare professional through those social media platforms. Now we are seeing pharma companies going on TikTok, on Instagram, and other social media, which means that they are trying new ways of engaging healthcare professional and patients. Also, 2023, we will see an acceleration of pharma e-commerce. This is a very big trend, and we can see that the COVID pandemic has been a boon for the global online pharmacy market. People are choosing internet pharmacies because it's appealing features, including lower price, easy drug availability, and home delivery possibilities. And also, we have witnessed now that general practitioners can submit online prescriptions, and this with the support of the whole market growth. So we have this business coming to a 180 billion global business by 2026, with a 17% annual turnover growth, basically, depending on the Fortune Business Insights paper. Also, this is a JP Morgan equity research. So e-commerce penetration in the pharma industry is one of the lowest in most of the industries. So this is an American study. Of course, it depends on the country. Some countries are more advanced, but we can see there's a lot of improvement towards penetration of the retail pharmacy in the industry. Also here, it's IQVIA numbers, but global pharma e-commerce market is booming. basically, and we expect of almost 22% of growth of turnover during the forecast period of 2022 and 2029. But also what that's mean for pharma companies is that you would be very wary about the regulation, which is evolving very quickly. Here we have a map of what is allowed to sell online, depending OTC drug and RX drugs. We can see in some countries it's legal for both prescription and non-prescription drugs to be, bought online. Some are legal only for non-prescription and only OTC, and some others are not allowed at all. And this is really depending on the law. And I know in France, the different people in the government and in the National Assembly are discussing towards opening the possibility to buy drugs online, even prescription drugs. So as a conclusion, digital health is really a booming giant market. Sorry for the French at the left. It's a booming industry. The consumer health market is expected to grow by more than 60% between 2021 and 2025, reaching about like 70 billion euros. Online pharmacy and online medical consultation account for more than 3/4 of the market's revenues, but it's e-health applications that are expected to experience the strongest growth in the coming years, with global revenue expected to exceed $2 billion in 2025, and an increase of 77% in 4 years. Also, we have here example of different projects I've been launching when I'm speaking about collaborations between startup and pharma companies in every kind of field. So here are different startups I've been developing, and collaborations, for example, between Servier and Deep Life to create what we call digital twins of cells and to predict cells' reaction to drug, genes, and editing of environmental perturbation. We have also witnessed a project between Amgen and Kodak startup to build a digital solution allowing the identification of high-risk post-therapeutic patients unknown to hospitals. We have witnessed company collaborations between Chugai and Chronolife, for example, to define the frequency and severity of bleeding under treatment and to allow early detection of joint bleeding to adapt the therapeutic strategy. And so what I strongly encourage you is just to chase and start scouting for startups to work with. You have a lot of promising startups in the field, in the value chain, either in R&D, in clinical research, diagnostic prevention, therapeutic and patient monitoring and production. Just here is a few of them I'm working with, but there's a lot of different others. And the future of the field will be depending on that. And last but not least, the future is also about recruitment. And I have been in a conference of AstraZeneca called AZ 2025. And Pascal Soriot, who is the CEO of global CEO of AstraZeneca, said that the future will be a world of partnership with small companies and digital companies. This emphasis of digital technologies will require the recruitment of people with a particular blend of skills. And it's complicated because you've got a lot of people who understand artificial intelligence and math and how to manage data. Then you have other people who understand biology. And we need to find people who understand both and find a way to kind of bridge the two. And so the future will also be recruiting and forming those kind of people able to accelerate the transformation by understanding both medical, pharma, and both digital worlds. So that's all, folks. Thank you very much. And we are very open to questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you guys for that very insightful presentation overall. As Vincent mentioned, we'll now go ahead and take some time to answer some questions. So just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your control panel and place the name of the presenter at the beginning of it if you would like to address this question to a specific presenter. So, first question I have here is for Tom. Tom, the role of life science companies needs to change, and engagement with customers is key area of focus for us. How do you see interactions which HCP and other key stakeholders changing moving into 2023?
Yeah, thank you, James. This is a really important part of the industry, I think, is engaging with customers and increasingly new stakeholders. And actually, Vincent touched on it on his presentation around omnichannel. And there's a lot of hype and a lot of talk around it. But in my opinion, what it means is, first of all, offering a range of channels, whether that's face-to-face as well as virtual interactions as well. I think at the same time, you need to be able to engage via, say, the websites and chatbots, and make sure you're using all the channels at your disposal to make sure that you're interacting in the way that they want to be interacted with. But alongside that, you need to make sure that the content and the messages you're putting out there are relevant and resonate with the HCPs as well. So there's a number of different factors that feed into omnichannel, and in thought leadership, we've done a lot of work on looking at what those new areas in a post-pandemic world might look like. So please do reach out to me or I guess Google the IQVIA white paper on customer engagement, because it's really interesting.
Thank you, Tom. Vincent, this question is for you. Talking about digital therapeutics, the whole idea seems remarkable. Can you give one striking example of such software and how it works?
Yes, of course. So we have the example of MoveCare, which is a software medical device developed in France in the hospital of Le Mans. And basically, it's a web app designed to patients with lung cancer. And they were doing a clinical trial involving 30,000 patients, 15,000 taking the best combination of drugs to fight lung cancer, and 15,000 other patients taking the same bunch of drugs, but also having this app. And this app is basically asking questions every week to the patients to know if they have adverse effects, how they feel, and some very easy questions like how many times do you wake up during the night, how many times do you go to pee, and some other questions that might seem kind of very stupid for a patient point of view. But actually, for the medical team, those questions are very important, because it can mean that the drug is at too high dosage or too low dosage, and it needs to be changed. So every time those patients gave information every week, and the hospital had the information about the questions. And at some point, if they see that the level of pain of the patient is going higher, then they call right away the patient to the hospital in order to check if everything's okay and to modulate the dosage of the chemotherapy. And by just doing so, they have been able, in the control group compared to the group with the MoveCare app, to spend the lifespan of the patients more than 7.6 months, whereas the control group have a lifespan of 5 months. The group with the app have a lifespan of 12 months. So it has been approved by the French ministry. It has been approved as a medical device and is reimbursed by the Social Security nowadays. So it's a kind of striking example of how simple a technology, when it's well adapted and well used by patients and healthcare professionals, can do wonders, and almost doubling, multiply by 2, the lifespan of patients.
Thank you, Vincent. Tom, this question is for you. How could we decompose the COG's growth into product geographic mix and volume versus input prices, and the same for the sales growth for the top pharma companies?
Yeah, I think I did mention the cost of goods sold metric, and just to I guess clarify what I mean by that, is the direct cost related to selling products. So again, relates to the commercial model, the go-to-market model piece, and obviously omnichannel feeds into that. I would say that since the pandemic, that has been transformed in the sense that the sales force, so having reps on the ground talking to physicians, has reduced quite significantly, and that's obviously reduced the cost of goods sold, and that's purely because the physical restrictions that were imposed during the pandemic. Since then, there has been an increased demand from HCPs for face-to-face interactions, and particularly in markets like Spain, Italy, they very much value that face-to-face interaction and contact, which pushes up the cost of goods sold, depending on which country you're operating in. From a product standpoint, I think it matters a bit more on, is it a primary care product? Is it a very niche specialty secondary care product? And how are you actually going to go about designing that go-to-market model? So there's going to be a lot of factors that feed into this decision on how you structure your costs. But I think there's going to be an increase of this physical, in-person, face-to-face, but alongside, more so now than ever, the virtual interactions and the emails are becoming very much more important too.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Vincent, question here for you. Any insight into the B2B side of pharma and e-commerce, and also their purchasing behaviors?
I don't know if the if the participant can speak to precise their questions. So the B2B side of pharma and e-commerce and any purchasing behaviors. Yes, I've been working with a pharma company, a French pharma company, and they are this summer, and they are going more and more towards the e-commerce. And so we can see there's a strong change between China. Also, Russia was very, very, very advanced, and some other countries mainly China and Russia. But it's a very, very advanced topic. It's I'm giving trainings about this specifically. So I would be happy to talk with the person who has this question, but in person, basically. But yeah, it's what I can say is there are some practices that I can witness mainly in China and Russia, which are very interesting, and that can apply to Europe and countries that want to go e-commerce once the legislation will allow us to do it. So don't hesitate to contact me on LinkedIn and we can discuss, because it's a very, very, very hot topic.
Tom, a question here for you is any ideas on the trend in research spends for the next few years?
Very broad question, very, very topical though. I would say the main areas of focus are going to remain oncology, purely because there's the unmet medical need across lots of different indications. Another key one would be mental health and dementias, which I guess would fit in the neuroscience or neurology category. You could argue almost that we are today with neuroscience where we were in, say, the early 2000s with oncology. So there's so much untapped potential. And we have seen, rightly and wrongly, and some failures along the way with Aduhelm around. There's lots more R&D to be done in that space. But I would say that one other key trend that I think is going to come in the R&D space is this closer to home idea. So the idea that the patient doesn't need to come into hospital as often anymore. It's about the devices and about treating patients in their own home. So I think that's something that's come out of the pandemic. And that will also continue in the R&D space in 2023.
Thank you, Tom. Right, I have a question here that's probably open for both of you. So I'll ask it to Vincent first before asking you, Tom. The question is, what is your perception about involving youth into digital pharma? Would you like to go first, Vincent?
I cut my microphone. Sorry. So thank you for the question. So yeah, as I said, and as Pascal Soriot said, we need people who are able to understand pharma, medicine, and also digital technologies. And since 2 years now, 2 years and a half, I have been asked to create curriculums in medical schools, in business schools, even about digital health. And at very early stage, like at the second or third year medical studies, or at fifth year master's studies, or even PhD level. And this is very important. We can see more and more thesis, master's thesis, PhD thesis in Europe going on the field of digital pharma. We see a lot of more initiatives nowadays combining biotech and digital, for example. And that's why now trainings are almost compulsory and are developing in all different curriculum about digital in pharma. So yes, it's very important. I think all the schools should do it and touch it, because anyway, someone who wants to get into the pharma industry now have to understand at least the basic principles of the different technologies. And I didn't speak about metaverse and blockchain and Web 3.0 and other things, but those pharma companies and CEOs and C-level people are counting on the youth to be able to be the experts in that. So yeah, training and involvement of youth people in the industry about digital is crucial nowadays, and also for the next years.
Yeah, and I'd jump in on that as well, Vincent. I think I'm going to break down two parts of that question. So I think embracing digital pharma is not an option, it's compulsory. So anyone in pharma needs to kind of get on board with that. And whether that's the youth and they're coming through with new initiatives and new ideas, then I'm all for that, of course. But I think actually having a diverse background of people and with varying levels of experience, I don't think it necessarily matters in terms of it's not age dependent. As long as it's improving human health and driving healthcare forward, I think it's important for everyone to get involved in digital pharma.
Brilliant, thank you, guys. I have another question here, and more for Vincent, but you can also jump in as well, Tom. The question is around digital tattoos for detecting the flow of blood and other excipients going into blood. I think the question is really, is there any updates on that or any involvement? So who would like to go first?
Yeah, just a few words, but I heard about this, digital tattoos detecting the flow and other excipients going in the blood. So we have to be very wary and careful about all these promises. We all know about the Theranos disaster, and actually the founder was recently put in jail for I don't know how many years, like 10 or 15 years. So yeah, we have a lot of crazy technology coming on, but we still have to take the time to evaluate them. I have not seen that from my own eyes, and I'm not studying it. Even if I heard about those digital tattoos, it would be a kind of a great idea, maybe at some level, but still we have to be wary. We have to study the ethical involvement of such solution. When we speak about tattoos, we can think about the darkest times of humanity also. So I think we have a lot of promises, but we have to be very careful and always let science study if it's feasible, if it's good for health, and also ethics to know if it's good to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope to talk a little bit more on that if you want. I mean, I'd say, and I won't necessarily talk to specifics around the digital tattoos because that's not something I'm particularly familiar with, but I will say that, I've seen and over my experience in industry, startups and tech companies and all of these initiatives, they don't all work, right? So some are really successful, and it's very much dependent on funding and expertise and the knowledge sector that you have and the partnership side of things. But not all of them successful. And I think, as to Vincent's point, you need the use case and the evidence that to make it a reality. So more to come in that space, I'm sure.
Thank you, guys. Right, I think we've time for one more question, and it's another open question for both of you, so I'll ask it. And the question or topic is around e-drug marketing and how will it affect the current global drug market. So, Tom, I'll let you start with that question.
Yeah, and it's quite a broad e-drug marketing. So I guess promoting drugs online, and you need to be careful where you do that. Again, in the US, there's fewer regulations around you can promote to the general public, just as an observation. But marketing is a huge area of the pharma industry. And I think the way that they engage with customers and engage with a wider network of stakeholders and get their drugs to the patients that need them and act as that facilitator is going to change. So yeah, there's going to have a digital edge going forward into 2023. Whether we'll get to see what drugs come to market and whether that will actually be disruptive in the way that they might be. But e-marketing and online marketing is definitely something to focus on in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I developed a bit on this earlier, so yeah, nothing to add.
Great. Well, thank you guys. I think that's it for today. So I just want to thank firstly to Tom and Vincent for taking the time for this great session and giving some fantastic insight to what to expect for 2023 in terms of trends and development of digitalization into pharma. I want to thank our audience for their attention and for joining us today. It was great to hear from you. And for those who we couldn't answer the questions, please do reach out to Tom and Vincent, as we were happy to help and answer your queries. And yeah, so thank you, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.